Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Yasmin Turk, and I am a part of Austin Energy's community engagement team. Before we begin, I would like to direct your attention to the Q&A icon on your screen. You can type in questions in the Q&A at any time during the presentation by clicking on the Q&A icon. Once a question is answered, it will appear in the Q&A box. Some questions may be answered live at the end of this presentation. This is an information session, and if you have feedback, please visit publicinput.com/generation. Now, to begin this webinar, it is my pleasure to introduce Austin Energy's General Manager, Mr. Bob Kahn.
Hello, everybody. As Yasmin said, I'm Bob Kahn, General Manager. I've actually been here about 6 weeks. I'm having a good time. First thing I want to talk about is what we do, our mission. And as you can see on the screen there, deliver clean, affordable, reliable energy and great customer service. A little bit about Austin Energy. We're, 125 plus years old. We're the third largest municipally owned utility in the country. I think CPS, San Antonio, and LA are the only ones that are bigger than us. We have north of 500,000 customers, and we have a really compact service territory, 437 square miles, with a lot of our service area outside of the city of Austin. We're also vertically integrated. And what that means is in 1999, when the legislators deregulated the market, they forced the investor-owned utilities that used to be Houston Light and Power and Texas Utilities. They had to stop being vertically integrated, and they had to split up their companies. All the MOUs in Texas are still vertically integrated. So we have generation, transmission, and distribution in our portfolio together. We also, as you can see, we provide district energy and cooling, a lot of it in the downtown area. We also, some of you may not realize, we also run the 311 call center and the billing solution center for Austin Energy and also for Austin Water. Tonight, one of the reasons we're here, or the main reason we're here, is we're going to be discussing an update to our generation resource plan that we're working on. Michael Enger will be talking about that in a few minutes. But this update is going to be done in response to a few things. The first thing is, and the main thing is, our climate protection plan that the City Council has directed us to work on. The goal is to have 100% carbon-free generation by we're working on 2030 is what we hope to do. And of course, in doing that, we have to balance a few things: reliability and affordability. So there's a balancing act there, and Michael will talk more about that as he does his presentation. And also a few other things have happened since we did our first update on this in 2019 and 2020. There are some new opportunities out there. You've all probably heard of the Inflation Reduction Act. Michael will talk about that. That creates some opportunities where we can get some grants and monies to help us do the things we need to do to meet our climate protection goals. And also there's been market changes ordered by the legislators. You probably saw they're working on market redesign along with the Public Utility Commission of Texas. So I hope you enjoy Michael's presentation, and I appreciate talking to you all.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you for spending a little bit of time to learn a little bit more about resource planning with me. My name is Michael Enger. I'm the Acting Vice President of Market Operations and Resource Planning here at Austin Energy. I've been with Austin Energy a little bit over 22 years, and I'm very fortunate to have a number of people on our team, especially in the resource planning area, that have actually been in the industry for over 30 years. Bob talked a little bit about Austin Energy being vertically integrated. But I want to talk a little bit about how Austin Energy produces power and ultimately how Austin Energy receives power to serve our customers here at the retail level. So Austin Energy is part of the ERCOT market. We are a market participant, and participation is mandatory. It is not voluntary. The way the ERCOT market works is all of the generation supply, so all the generators will sell their power into the wholesale market at a price of their location, at the location where they are located, into the ERCOT market. And then all of the load or consumption is then purchased back from the market at a price at its location. So we are selling all of our generation supply into the ERCOT market, and then we are buying all of our consumption, all of our load from the ERCOT market. And I talked about the different areas where we would be, as well as ERCOT. So what is ERCOT? ERCOT is the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, and it manages that Texas wholesale market, which has the buying and the selling, but they also balance the electrical supply and demand in order to maintain reliability. I talked a little bit about where we are buying power versus where we're selling power. So on this first graphic, I have ERCOT. So all of everything that's not gray, so most of Texas is the service territory of ERCOT. You will notice there's a little white circle there in the middle of Texas with a little bit of purple in there. That is Austin Energy's service territory. So that is where we're buying all of our power from the ERCOT wholesale market. But looking a little bit at our generation supply, I just wanted to show you where is the generation supply for Austin Energy, the generators that we either own or have contracted for the output. And I want to just notice that it is very spread out and very diverse throughout Texas. You notice we have a very diverse fuel makeup or mixture to our supply portfolio. You'll see we have wind up there in the Panhandle as well as North Texas. As you look over to the west, you'll see we have a lot of solar assets where the irradiance is very, very high. If you move down to the south, you'll notice that we have a lot of wind down along the coast, as well as in South Texas. You'll notice as you look back into that little circle there, it is Austin. We have a few natural gas generators there, as well as some solar and some utility scale solar. Just east of Austin, we are a part owner of a coal plant called the Fayette Power Project in Fayette County. Just southeast of that, you'll notice that red dot, we are part owner of a nuclear power plant in Bay City near Houston, Texas. And to the far east, you'll see that gray dot. We own a 105 megawatt biomass wastewood plant out in that area. If you look at our total generation capacity, that totals about 4,700 megawatts of capacity. And if you look over to the right, you'll see our all-time peak demand. So our the most load we're consuming at any given time. So we recently just broke a new record. We broke 3,000 megawatts for the first time just about a week ago here in August with the higher temperatures. And then you'll see in our winter peak is closer to 2,600 megawatts that occurred back this past December. What you will notice is, or what we are starting to see is that those peaks are getting closer and closer together as we begin to electrify more of the heating demand here in Austin and rely less on natural gas. But what you'll notice is both a fuel diversification within our portfolio, as well as a geographic diversification within our portfolio, especially when it comes to some of our renewables. This next slide, I just want to talk a little bit about why we do that. So all that power is being sold at its location at a price at that location. That power is being bought back in the Austin area load zone at a price at its location, but we spread it pretty far out. And so if you look at the left side of this slide or this graphic, what I have here is I have various generation output profiles for different types of renewable assets in different parts of the state. So wind does not blow everywhere in Texas all of the time, but it is blowing somewhere in Texas most of the time. And solar is not shining everywhere in Texas all of the time, as we'll have clouds in the sky, but by spreading out, we'll be able to capture some of that solar most of the time as well. So if you look over at the generation curves, you will see slight differences in when they are producing on average. When we look over to the right side and we stack those generation curves together, or those output curves together and stack them, what we get is we get a shaded area that looks a lot more like what our load shape looks like. And while we are not directly serving our load, it's very advantageous for us to have generation supply producing at the same time we're consuming. So the revenues from that generation supply help offset the load costs that we are incurring. So how does our generation supply or capacity mix compare to the rest of the state? So over on the left side, you'll see Austin Energy's generation mix. What you'll notice is we have a very large slice of that pie is wind, as well as solar. We have the biomass, coal, gas, and nuclear. If you look over at the statewide ERCOT generation mix, all the other generators that are in this market within the state of Texas, you'll see a very similar pie graph, but maybe the slices of the pie are a little bit different in shape and size. What you'll notice is that we've been a little bit ahead of the rest of the state of Texas, the rest of the ERCOT market in our transition to more of the wind and solar generation. Maybe a little bit slower in the electrical battery storage. But what we have done is we have retired 2 gas units over the last 2 years of 750 megawatts, which has reduced the size of that gas pie slice in our generation mix. And we have been adding wind and solar. If you look over at the ERCOT side, that gas slice is a little bit bigger, but we do see gas retirements upcoming that have been announced. And if you look at the generation queue in ERCOT, and those are the new generators that are looking to tie into ERCOT and start producing power to help meet the load in Texas, what we are seeing is we are seeing a lot of solar in that generation queue. There's about 31,000 more megawatts of solar that is looking to interconnect into the ERCOT market. There's about 5,000 to 7,000 more megawatts of wind looking to interconnect, 13,000 more megawatts of batteries, and just 1,200 megawatts of gas. So over time, we would expect to see that statewide ERCOT generation mix begin to look a little bit more like the generation mix that Austin Energy has in our current portfolio. So resource generation and climate protection plan to 2030. The 2030 plan commits Austin Energy to continue safely delivering clean, affordable, and reliable energy sufficient to meet customer demands while pursuing the City of Austin's climate protection and sustainability goals. This plan was originally worked on back in 2019 and was approved by the City Council in March of 2020. While we were working on this plan, it became apparent to all of us in our working group, as well as in working with the community, that it was very, very important to our customers that we have carbon reduction within our portfolio, but it's also very, very important that we maintain affordability. We recognized that there was a lot going on in the ERCOT market at that time, back in 2019 to 2020 period, as well as the energy industry in general, as we're seeing emerging technologies and an energy transition occurring. So that is where that third circle in that graphic comes, flexibility. We need to maintain flexibility as we move forward in time. So over on the right side is a little bit of text that is pulled straight from the Austin Energy Resource Generation and Climate Protection Plan to 2030. And it says the 2030 plan is intended to be flexible and dynamic in order to respond to changing circumstances, including customer electric load, economic conditions, energy prices, and technological development, while strictly committing to firm carbon reductions. From the 2030 plan, we have looked at some of the values and priorities of our community, and those would be environmental sustainability, reliability, affordability, as well as cost stability. And Bob mentioned a little bit earlier that there's a little bit of a balancing that must occur between those different values and priorities in order to meet each one of those values and priorities. I've listed down below some of the objectives and goals, resource objectives and goals that were outlined in the resource plan. I'm not going to go into all of these tonight, but I will just like to highlight a couple of them. The Decker Creek Power Station, we committed to retiring Decker 1 and Decker 2 by April of 2022. That has been done successfully. Those were older steam units here in Austin, Texas, up in the north, that originally went online back in the late 70s. So they were near the end of their useful life. Another highlight I'd like to point out is within the resource plan, there was a requirement to conduct a transmission study to better understand the reliability impacts if we are to shut down and retire additional local generation here in Austin, some of our other natural gas units. That has been recently completed and has really kicked off us doing the update at this time. So how are we doing on some of the other goals? I want to highlight just how we are performing on a couple of the larger ones. Over on the left, we have our carbon-free generation as a percentage of load. You will see that on a rolling 12-month basis, Austin Energy is producing enough carbon-free generation to make up about 71% of our total load. You'll also notice that that has probably come, or you probably have noticed that has come down since about May of 2022 or September of 2022, when that was a little bit higher and closer to 80%. We did see a very unseasonably low wind period this year in April, May, and the first part of June, which has impacted some of the wind production in our portfolio, as well as we start to see more and more renewables coming onto the system. There are periods of time where the market is very oversupplied and we're seeing more and more curtailments. And so we've seen less production out of some of the assets within our portfolio. Looking over on the right side, we're looking at Austin Energy's power plant emissions, and here we're specifically looking at carbon emissions, and the scale is in millions of tons. And so back in 2018, before we started our resource plan work for this most recent resource plan that was approved by City Council in March of 2020, we were emitting about 5.3 million tons of CO2 from our power plants that year. Fast forward to 2022, and we have reduced that down to about 3.5 million tons. So a significant reduction of not quite 2 million tons, but fairly close. And how did we do that? We have done that through one of the tenets of our last resource plan, which we refer to as REACH, Reduce Emissions Affordably for Climate Health. What REACH is, it's a market-based solution to reduce our emissions. What we do here is we value carbon into the dispatch of our power plants. And so when revenues or margins are lower, we will forego producing energy, buy that off of the market, or, well, we're buying all of our load off the market, but we will not be offsetting the cost of our load with that energy. We're willing to take the higher cost in order to emit less CO2. But at the same time, when the market goes very, very high and ERCOT is under stress or duress and needs more generation to support reliability and support the grid for all of Texas, we're able to ramp that unit up near the top. And so just looking at some of the benefits of REACH, looking at kind of both sides of it, will you look over at the left-hand side of the table, we have reduced 4.12 million tons of carbon emissions since we implemented REACH in March of 2020 at a cost of about $12.45 per ton. Part of REACH is the A, which is affordability. So we like to compare how affordable have we been able to reduce carbon out of our stack emissions relative to the other US carbon markets. And so if you look over at the California carbon market, that is currently trading around $36 per ton. And if we look at the Northeast carbon market, referred to as RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, you'll see that's trading more in the $14 to $16 per ton. So we feel like we are able to accomplish this reduction of carbon emissions in an affordable manner. If you look over on the right side, this shows some of the benefits of being able to utilize that unit when the market is stressed and under duress, and the grid needs more generation to support reliability. So you can see over, this was August 17th, so just a couple of weeks ago, we had very, very high prices. You may recall it was a very hot day. I think we got up to 107, 108 degrees. You will see that over here, this is the power price that we were paying in the wholesale market to provide power for our load. You can see that gets up over $5,000 a megawatt hour. On that particular day, the Fayette Power Project made almost $11 million of net revenue that helped offset that load cost. So while it's not directly serving our load, the value can help offset our load cost and help maintain that affordability. To put that in perspective, $11 million is about 2% of the net cost within the PSA that is then passed through to our customers. So if we have a handful of 5 to 10 days that are like this power plant can help keep us from having to raise our PSA rates anywhere from 10 to 20%. So moving over to resource planning, it is a process. There is a lot of inputs and a lot of assumptions that we need to make in order to run our models and do our scenario analysis. We need to take into account our customers' wants, their values and priorities. We need to look at our load and how is it growing? How is it changing? And how much different is it than when we originally looked and forecasted back in 2019? What is the overall environment, the change in supply stack and ERCOT? How are we going to maintain reliability? And as well as the financial impact to this utility as well as the city. So if you look over on the right-hand side, we kind of have the kind of steps there, set scope and objectives, develop those inputs and assumptions, modeling and scenario analysis, risk and financial analysis, and then ultimately selecting the preferred strategy. At the end, Yasmin will talk a bit about a survey. We really appreciate everybody taking that survey and giving us your input. We want to ensure that the objectives that we're setting are aligned with our customers. So a lot has changed since we approved this resource plan back in 2020, or City Council approved this resource plan back in March of 2020. I don't have to list all of them, but many of you realize we have been through a pandemic, which certainly changed many things in the way we approach things. It also created some supply chain constraints and issues. We have seen some extreme weather events that fell outside of the modeling that we did back in 2019. In response to some of those extreme weather events, we have seen quite a few regulatory and ERCOT market changes. And we've also seen increased market volatility as well as congestion costs. And I'll talk a little bit about each one of these. So when it comes to extreme weather events, over on the left-hand side of this graphic, I have a temperature map or heat map, well, cold map, I guess, in this situation, of Texas during the Uri event. And during the Winter Storm Uri, we saw temperatures that were 30 to 50 degrees below normal. significantly colder than what Texas usually experiences. And it lasted for a prolonged period of time. Anybody who lived in Texas during that time probably is well aware of what occurred during that week and how difficult and strenuous it was on the grid. Over on the right-hand side, I have last summer. So last summer was actually the second hottest summer on record. And unfortunately, we are looking to beat that this year. This may be the second hottest summer or potentially the hottest summer on record. So as we see these more and more extreme weather events, we need to ensure whatever resource portfolio we are putting together in our resource and generation and climate protection plan is able to weather these events and keep Austin Energy in good financial health at the end of one of these events. So because of those extreme weather events, especially Winter Storm Uri, where we had rotating outages throughout the state as directed by ERCOT, we have seen some significant changes, both at the legislative level and as well as ERCOT with market rule changes. Some of the impacts, I won't go through all of the different changes that we have seen, but one change in particular is that they have developed new reliability products in the market. And what that essentially does is it keeps some of the generation on the sideline to be available when they need it, if forecast errors occur or if a power plant trips offline. But by holding more generation on the sidelines, that leaves less generation to produce power on every other hour throughout the year, which then leads to higher average costs. Also, some of these changes have changed the value for different types of generation types. Some generators that may have more reliability attributes have benefited from some of these market changes, and some generation types that may not have as many reliability attributes have actually been adversely affected with their economics. Looking at increased market volatility, this is a graphic of Austin Energy's service territory. So once again, where we are buying our power from ERCOT, what we are consuming. The black line on this graphic is the summer of 2020, so June through a few days ago. This doesn't have yesterday or the day before, but what you will see is in 2020, you'll see there were a few price spikes there. One that got almost up to $2,500, but it's a handful of price spikes. Looking at the orange line, which is 2023 this summer, you'll notice quite a few more price spikes and much greater magnitude in those price spikes. So we're seeing that increased market volatility and those increased wholesale market costs for load. Moving over to congestion, I'll start with just a high-level kind of heat map, if you will. You can look at these graphics similar to you might look at a temperature map when you're looking at the forecast. So on a temperature map, something that is red signifies higher temperatures, and something that is blue would be lower temperatures. So the darker blue, the lower the temperature, the brighter the red, the higher the temperature. In ERCOT, it's similar with the exception that instead of temperature, we're looking at price. So the darker blue something is, the lower the price that generator is getting paid or that load is paying for power. The brighter the red, the more that generator is getting paid or the more that load is paying for power. And I want to show this graphic, and it's mainly to make the point that if you look at the top three graphics there, that all occurred on August 16th of 2023. I just went back a couple days. And the point here is that this congestion pattern can change quickly, and it can change in many different ways. It's not something that's seasonal, that is easily forecastable. It is something that is really dictated by what is going on with other power plants throughout the state of Texas, where the wind is blowing at any given time, as well as what may be occurring with any type of transmission elements that are going into outage or having issues. The graphic down below is just August 11th, so it's another day where you can see that congestion pattern changed very quickly and very rapidly. So what is congestion? We talked about the map where some prices are higher than other prices, but why does that happen? Why is ERCOT doing that, and what does this mean? So congestion, just to use an example that maybe we can all relate to here in Austin, Texas, is if we think about congestion kind of like traffic. We've all been stuck on I-35 probably at some point while we have lived here. So let's think about transmission lines as roads, and we can think of electrons as cars. So if we had somebody, so ERCOT is looking at transmission lines. If there was somebody monitoring all of the roads in and around Austin, looking at if there's any accident or if any of those roads closed, can we divert all of that traffic and to other roads and can keep all the traffic moving and avoid gridlock? Gridlock is unsafe, right? Ambulances can't get to where they need to go. Fire trucks can't get where they need to go. Much like if the electrons stop moving, or we look at that as a blackout, that can be very unsafe as well. We don't have the electricity we need to support our customers, support life-saving or life-needed equipment, as well as security. So what ERCOT is doing is monitoring those transmission lines. And when it feels like there's too much electrons on any one line, that if one of these lines shut down, or if there was an issue on these lines, that they would not be able to divert all of the electrons or cars over to another line or road, then they will start to send price signals to try to have less power coming from one location and more power coming from another location in order to manage the flow on those roads to ensure that if there was one road that closed down or there was an accident, that we can divert all those cars or electrons and not experience gridlock or a blackout. Austin Energy is also experiencing something upon retirement of Decker 2 that is a little bit more localized. So congestion can happen throughout the state. And I showed a few graphics of that and how it can move around pretty quickly. What we are seeing in Austin Energy as well is this localized congestion that we also refer to as load zone price separation. So if you look over on the left side of this slide, you will see a dark blue line there. This is on June 15th. And you will notice that line goes very high and sits there for a number of hours. On this day, on that blue line, that's the price that we were paying to buy wholesale power to serve our customers. Now down below there, you'll see an orange line. That orange line is the real-time average price that was being paid throughout the market. So that's the average price generators were getting paid. So the blue line is the price that Austin Energy was buying the power from, and the orange line is more in line with the average price the generators in our portfolio were getting paid. So this creates a significant difference in cost versus revenue, financial imbalance, if you will, that can put additional pressure on our rates. So if you look over the right side, just maybe a little bit better way to explain this is if we look at that orange circle as kind of the Austin area, our service territory. We have some power plants within our area, and there are power plants outside of our area. So these black lines are transmission lines or roads. And so while we are not serving our customers' power directly from our power plants, the electrons are going to flow the path of least resistance. So when they are closer to load, they will flow towards that load. And when they're further away, they have to travel a larger distance to get to that load. And so what you'll see here is we have many roads where electrons are flowing within the city, as well as roads where electrons are flowing from outside of the city in to serve our load. So as we start to retire some of the units within our load zone, that just requires more electrons to flow into our city to help serve our load. And so we can build additional roads. And an example I'd like to give here is we've all seen that fast food restaurant here in Austin that's very, very popular. And we see the drive-through line back up onto either the access road or maybe onto Riverside, and we're not seeing the cars moving. They're backed up on the road. So that's kind of that gridlock we were talking about. So how do we get those cars moving? How do we get those electrons moving? Well, we can add more drive-through lines, right? And that's what you've seen a lot of these fast food restaurants do. And that gets the cars moving through. And that's kind of like adding additional transmission lines. And that's great. And we've seen that work. I've seen that work all throughout the city. But at some point, as demand gets bigger and bigger, as this city continues to grow, the kitchen in that fast food restaurant may not be able to keep up with demand, and we may need to build a new fast food restaurant and divert some of the cars in that direction to maintain that flow and ensure we don't see gridlock. So those are some of the challenges that have occurred since we passed this resource plan, but there's some great new and emerging opportunities as well. Bob did talk a little bit about the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as that piece of legislation. The Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act was also passed in the meantime since we approved the plan versus where we are today. Both of those legislative pieces of legislation are designed to help support carbon-free and renewable energy, as well as help kickstart some of the industries that can help support carbon-free and renewable energy. One of the great things that we see in the Inflation Reduction Act is in the past, municipalities were not able to take advantage of tax credits. So it was more economic for us to contract for power from a renewable facility than it was to buy, build, and own it ourselves. Under the Inflation Reduction Act, that is no longer the case, and we are able to receive a similar benefit that a taxable entity or a private entity could receive. So it has given us a pathway for more economic renewable ownership of assets. It has also created a pathway to potentially build more local solar and smaller solar installations in and about Austin and make them closer or more economic to those larger utility scale solar facilities. And when we look over at the new and emerging technologies, there have been some technologies that are maturing a bit faster than we had originally forecasted. For example, we talked about the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. There are tenets in there, or there are incentives in there to help promote the green hydrogen industry. That is hydrogen that is produced with renewable energy and would be carbon free. We're also seeing longer duration storage become more of a reality. A lot of the storage in Texas is only 2 hours. If you'll recall, during Uri, that was a multi-day event. We are now seeing storage as long as 100 hours becoming commercialized. We are seeing renewed interest in advanced nuclear reactors. Governor Abbott recently sent a memo to the Public Utility Commission of Texas, instructing them to work with ERCOT to create incentives to bring on more nuclear power in ERCOT. He would like Texas to be a nuclear generation leader in the future. And in addition to that, we are now seeing more and more carbon capture and sequestration, and not just being talked about or demo projects. We're now starting to see it being commercialized. I know of a carbon capture and sequestration device that was retrofitted onto a gas plant in California that went commercial or went online just last month in July. So what's next? What we want to do is we want to solicit your feedback. We are customer driven and community focused. We'd like to hear what you have to say. So we have a survey that Yasmin will talk a little bit about here in just a moment. We are going to use information from that survey and that input, as well as information we have from these new, existing, and emerging technologies to run scenarios that are trying to meet our carbon reduction, affordability, reliability, and rate stability values and priorities. And after we have run a number of scenarios, we will come back with an updated plan with a resource portfolio that mitigates those current and future challenges with a focus on achieving our goals. With that, I will pass it back over to Yasmin.
Thank you so much, Mike. Now I'd like to share with you more about Austin Energy's public participation process. In addition to public meetings, Austin Energy has created a short 5-question survey to ask your input on the Resource Generation Plan update. You can use the QR code that's on your screen, or you can visit publicinput.com/generation to find out more information on the Austin Energy Resource Generation Plan update and to voice your opinion through the short survey. The survey will be open through September 29th, and aggregated results will be made available after the close of the survey.